past year has not been easy for employers, employees, and job seekers. One group that is new to our workforce and learning to navigate their entrance into it are our recent graduates. Ms. Cheryl Chan and Mr. Yip Hon Wing asked about the progress of our SG United traineeships and its impact on the graduates. Not surprisingly, fewer graduates found permanent full-time employment last year. SG United traineeships provided a viable alternative. I agree with Prof. Hun Hien Teck that our graduates on traineeship can gain industry-relevant experience and build their networks as pathways to future job opportunities. About 9 in 10 graduates from our institutes of higher learning who entered the labor force last year found jobs or traineeships within 6 months of graduation. Among them, 5,400 were on traineeships. Most of these traineeships were in growth sectors such as financial services, information and communications, and professional services. The SG United Traineeships program will be extended by an additional year till 31st March 2022. This allows the program to support the class of 2021 as well. We are making some adjustments to the SG United traineeships. We will raise training allowances for ITE and Polytechnic graduates. This is to give extra boost to our ITE and Polytechnic graduates who are facing more difficulty in finding jobs. We hope that our recent graduates who have not been able to find jobs can seriously consider traineeships. To facilitate this, the training allowance for ITE graduates will increase by about 30% up to a maximum of $1,800, and about 20% for Polytechnic graduates up to a maximum of $2,100. The traineeships are available to graduates from the private education institutes as well. Ms. Jessica Tan, Mr. Liang Ing Hua, and Ms. Nadia Sandin will be pleased to know that we have made changes to facilitate trainees' transition into jobs. The maximum traineeship duration has been shortened from 9 to 6 months. Companies will not be allowed to take on same trainee for a second traineeship. And we want to encourage host organizations to hire the trainees who have performed well during the traineeship stint. These changes will take effect on 1st April 2021. 2021 is a year of celebrating Singapore women. I wholeheartedly support this initiative, and I'd like to take this opportunity to update on the employment of women in Singapore. Our female employment has remained stable at 73% despite the impact of COVID-19. This speaks to the strength and resilience of our women amidst challenging labour market conditions and reflects our efforts in supporting female employment. Mr. Louis Ng asked if the practice of declaring the last drawn salary contributed to the gender pay gap. He referred to a Boston University study on the impact of salary history on gender pay gap. The USA introduced salary history ban in 2016. In Singapore, the adjusted gender pay gap is about 6%, which is lower than that in the USA. According to a 2018 study by Associate Professor Jessica Pan from NUS, occupational segregation was a key contributor of gender pay gap here. In Singapore, job seekers do not have to comply with requests for their last drawn salary, and employers cannot insist on it either. If a job seeker chooses to provide salary information, employers should use it carefully. I share Ms. Mariam Jaafar and Ms. Yowan Ling's conviction that we should support women to stay active in the labour force. The labour force participation rate for women has been rising steadily from 68.4% in 2010 to 76.6% in 2020. Even COVID-19 could not stop us. It's perhaps a sign that more men are sharing in caregiving responsibilities at home, and our workplaces have become more supportive of women. We are mindful, however, that in our Asian culture, women carry a disproportionate weight in caregiving duties. In 2020, 65% of women who were outside the labour force cited family responsibilities as the main reason, as compared to only 8% of men. Our answer to this is not in asking men to stay at home and be full-time caregivers, but to increase support for caregivers as a whole, so that they can contribute to work and have an income. I share Ms. Carrie Tan's views on the importance of supporting caregivers in the workforce. We acknowledge that caregiver leave helps them take care of their loved ones through short-term illnesses. However, it's also important to hear from caregivers what is most helpful to them. Our conversations with working caregivers showed that flexible work arrangements were more important and sustainable. We also support caregivers who would like to return to the workforce by providing career matching services from Workforce Singapore. Through providing a supportive environment for our working caregivers, we can empower them to fulfill career aspirations concurrently with family commitments. Lower wage caregivers who are working may also be eligible for Workfare Income Supplement Scheme, which provides up to $4,000 in cash and CPF top-ups annually. We have also taken steps to help caregivers build their retirement nest egg. First, we encourage cash top-ups to CPF accounts of caregivers through tax incentives and government matching grants. Second, we supplement the retirement income of seniors who had low incomes during their working years through the Silver Support Scheme. Ms. Carrie Tan also suggested for us to combine childcare and parent care leave to form a more holistic family care provision. While we agree that this might provide more flexibility to caregivers who have to take care of both children and the parents, we will have to consider the long-term implications of such a measure. COVID-19 has accelerated the adoption of flexible work arrangements. Most companies implemented flexible work arrangements last year in view of safe management requirements for the workplace. Many successfully redesigned work processes and infrastructure to facilitate staggered work hours and work from home arrangements. In 2020, the proportion of employers that provided some form of flexible work arrangements rose to 93%, and almost half of the employers provided formal teleworking arrangements. Mr. Louis Chua and Mr. Louis Ng would like to see flexible work arrangements continuing post-COVID. The importance of flexible arrangements was echoed in the recent Emerging Stronger conversations too. Particularly on working from home, a survey conducted in July last year showed that 4 in 5 workers wish to continue to work from home for at least half the time, even after government measures are lifted. Employers are aligned with this too. In a recent MOM online poll, more than 3 in 5 businesses indicated that they intend to continue to allow employees to work from home at least half the time post-COVID. Although COVID has significantly increased the proportion of people working from home, further study is needed to understand the impact of such arrangements on work productivity and well-being of employees in the long term. Some employers may feel that work from home, if protracted, could hinder collaboration, productivity, and building of team spirit. Some employees may prefer to work in the office if their home environment is not conducive of a social interaction. The degree to which work from home can be proliferated will vary across occupations. We will look at experiences of other jurisdictions such as the UK and Australia, which have introduced flexible work arrangement legislation. But we need to work with our tripartite partners to ensure a holistic representation of employers' and employees' interests as we decide on the steps for the longer term. We have recently formed an Alliance for Action for Work-Life Harmony to help companies instill workplace practices and resources to promote work-life harmony. In the long term, this will help companies better attract and retain talent. At its heart, a progressive workplace is one where everyone is treated fairly and empowered to perform at their best. There have been various calls by members, including Mr. Patrick Tay and Mr. Louis Ng, to introduce additional legislation to tackle workplace discrimination and harassment. We have laws to raise employment standards as we update them regularly. For harassment, we have the Protection from Harassment Act and the Penal Code. These laws enable the government to take action against harassers, including at the workplace. We can have more legislation to enforce against bad behavior at the workplace, but if we take a legal approach to every aspect of employment relations, we will have an adversarial industrial climate. Not legislating does not mean we don't have higher aspirations for our workforce and workplaces. We have tripartite guidelines, advisories, and standards, and these have worked well in advancing both employers' and employees' interests while maintaining positive and constructive relationship between both groups. Members may recall that before the Retirement and Re-employment Act was introduced, we also adopted a promotional approach. We will continue to review this bag of tools, introduce and upgrade the tools as necessary. Over the past 3 years, the Tripartite Alliance for Fair and Progressive Employment Practices handled an average of 400 discrimination cases annually including those arising from proactive checks by MOM. In about 50 cases each year, the employees were found to be in breach of the guidelines and had their work pass privileges suspended. Through the Fair Consideration Framework, we encourage fair employment practices that are open and merit-based. We hold employers to account for not considering the workforce in Singapore fairly. We proactively identify companies with suspicious workforce profiles, that is, companies that have an exceptionally high share of foreign PMETs compared to their industry peers, or high concentration of a single foreign nationality source. We place them on our FCF watch list for closer scrutiny of their hiring practices, even if they have not flouted any rules. More importantly, schemes like the Job Support Scheme, Jobs Growth Incentive and Professional Conversion Program tilt the balance in favor of hiring locals. This is similar to how we take a progressive approach to reducing other forms of workplace discrimination. Specifically for seniors, job redesign and rescaling have also enabled us to increase their employment in Singapore. Despite the absence of an age discrimination law, Singapore's senior employment rate increased from 59% to 67.5% in the past decade. In contrast, countries like the UK and US have age discrimination laws but lower senior employment rates than in Singapore. In short, we will use a range of tools as well as legal and regulatory measures to keep our workplaces progressive, fair, and inclusive. Mr. Chairman, Singaporeans take pride in being a caring and kind society. We teach our children to take care of vulnerable and disadvantaged. Many Singaporeans were outraged when we heard about what happened to Ms. Pieng Nedong, a foreign domestic worker from Myanmar who was brutally abused by her employer and died tragically in 2016. This was an act of extreme evil. Let me state unequivocally to this House that our society has no place for cruelty to anyone. We must do our best to support vulnerable groups such as the elderly, children, and foreign domestic workers. Foreign domestic workers play a key role in supporting our families, whether in household chores or caregiving. Most employers appreciate the help from their foreign domestic workers and build good relationships with them. However, some employers treat their foreign domestic workers unreasonably. In the worst cases, they inflict harm. Employers in Singapore must know that any abuse of foreign domestic workers will not be tolerated. The Penal Code was enhanced in 2020 to double the maximum punishment against individuals who abuse vulnerable people, including foreign domestic workers. MOM has been reviewing measures to better support foreign domestic workers and strengthen safeguards against abuse in 3 areas. First, making greater use of existing touch points with foreign domestic workers. Employment agents should have an interest to ensure that the foreign domestic workers they place settle in well, especially those working in Singapore for the first time. One-on-one interviews after newly arrived foreign domestic workers start work with employers, and mandatory off days would also give abused foreign domestic workers more opportunities to seek help. Second, in terms of reporting by doctors, we will work with the medical fraternity to better identify signs of abuse or distress. Third, our partner organizations like CDE and FAST can also expand their outreach and engagement to strengthen the network of support to foreign domestic workers. These measures do not in any way remove or reduce the responsibility of each employer to take care of his or her own foreign domestic workers. Neither can they eliminate completely the risk of foreign domestic worker abuse. But we must do all we can to minimize its incidents and build a culture of respect for foreign domestic workers in our homes and in our community. MOM will provide an update in due course. Mr. Chairman, please allow me to conclude in Mandarin. 尽管面对当前的挑战，我们会继续努力，为工友打造更加公平、更加包容的工作场所。无论性别、年龄、种族或身体状况，我们要所有国人都能在职场上发挥所长。不管是政府、雇主、工友，或是社会大众，我们都能尽一份力，保障社会里的弱智群体。我们应该携手同心，一同迈向一个更公平和更具凝聚力的社会。 Thank you.